October's greetings. I'm your host, Dr. Wolfula, with a review of Five Nights at Freddy's, the film adaptation of the hit video game series about what happens at just an average Chuck E. Cheese. Directed by Tammy and released in 2023. This film was first announced by Warner Brothers nearly a decade ago when the game series was at the height of its popularity, but it ended up in development hell and eventually under the banner of Blumhouse and Universal. And in that span of time, we saw the likes of a perplexing banana splits horror movie and that weird, suggestively named Willy's Wonderland flick starring Nick Cage that both tried to capitalize on the premise of Five Nights at Freddy's in the absence of an official film. And, well, an official film has finally come out. So is it any good? I'm not sure if I'm qualified to make that statement as far as it pertains to the audience that the movie has in mind. I can certainly say I didn't like the movie myself, but I didn't hate it either. I was just sort of baffled by the experience of watching Five Nights at Freddy's. The thing is, though, I'm not a fan of the games. I barely have any familiarity with the series or its lore. Things aren't for everybody, though. If I'm reviewing a fucking Halloween movie, or an even better example, a Scooby-Doo movie, I'm reviewing something like that from the perspective of being a fan. Something like that is made with a fan in mind, so I review something like that based on how well it meets a specific criteria. With Five Nights at Freddy's, though, I'm not a fan of the games, and it's clear that the movie isn't designed to make new fans. It's designed to appeal to an already existing fan base. The thing is, though, with something that is such a big, unavoidable part of pop culture, Five Nights at Freddy's first movie is a pretty big deal, and it's also going to attract viewers who are curious about what this franchise is all about. See what they're missing out on, but I do think this movie's probably just gonna alienate newcomers like me. Still, even though I'm not a fan of the games, I still saw the movie because I was curious, and it has Matthew Lillard in it, of course, and thought I'd have a fun time watching the movie regardless. I mean, video game adaptation or not, it's a fucking high-budget movie about animatronics on the loose killing people. How do you not make that entertaining to a wide audience? Somehow Blumhouse found a way, and I'll explain why in my review of Five Nights at Freddy's. But first, I have a message from my sponsor, me. Pledge to my Patreon today to support the channel, help it continue to grow, and you'll also get access to weekly movie nights every Sunday and archive commentaries if you miss the movie nights live. Just $5 a month to get a movie night every week. Pledge to patreon.com/Dr. Wolfula if you're interested, and I thank you in advance. Five Nights at Freddy's is the story of Mike, played by Josh Hutcherson, who used to be a teen heartthrob, but since aging out of that, he's stuck starring in a Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Mike is a mall security guard traumatized by the kidnapping of his brother Garrett when Mike and him were kids, and when Mike observes what he thinks is a kidnapping at the mall, he beats the living fuck out of the kidnapper, who turned out to be the dad of the kid who wasn't really being kidnapped at all. Talk about awkward. Instead of being incarcerated for being a violent psychopath, Mike is instead just fired from his mall security job and is given only one option by Mike's totally not suspicious career counselor, played by Matthew Lillard.
Given your track record, your options are going to be extremely limited.
Mike has to work as a security guard nights, 5 to be precise, at an establishment by the name of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. What's a Fazbear? Hell if I know. I think it's just there for the sake of alliteration.
Welcome to Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria.
Freddy's Pizza is essentially in the mold of those family restaurants that emerged in the 70s with arcades, playgrounds, and live entertainment by animatronic creatures. Restaurants like Chuck E. Cheese, Showbiz Pizza, or my personal favorite, Bullwinkle's Restaurant. Anyone remember that Rocky and Bullwinkle themed one? It was pretty cool.
Piece of cake.
Freddy Fazbear's Pizza has long been out of business, but still needs a security guard for some reason, despite its dilapidation. Mike doesn't question this lapse in logic, though, because he spends a lot of the movie just sleeping in order to relive the day his brother Garrett was abducted so he can figure out who took Garrett through some repressed memory, and the restaurant begins influencing Mike's dreams. Children appearing in Mike's dreams, mysteriously corresponding to the animatronic puppets inhabiting the restaurant, who seem to know something about what happened to Mike's brother Garrett. Yeah, this is a Freddy movie involving dreams, and hey, that's a certain other Freddy's territory, goddammit. Stay in your lane, Freddy Fazbear. And the child murder backstory too? Come on, get real.
Welcome to prime time, bitch!
So why is Mike even bothering with such a sketchy job? Well, he's the guardian of his little sister Abby, and Mike's Aunt Jane is trying to take Abby away from Mike by proving that Mike is an unfit guardian, which he is. He's prone to mood swings and violent outbursts. Abby is mentally troubled herself. She should be raised in a stable household. But, you know, Aunt Jane's a bitch, and Abby is attached to Mike since he's her brother and all. We're supposed to care about this dysfunctional family continuing unabated for some reason, because a lot of attention is thrust on this aspect of the story.
Are you gonna give me away?
I was Noah.
There's a whole subplot involving Aunt Jane hiring a babysitter to spy on Mike to get dirt on him to use in court, and Aunt Jane even hires goons to wreck Freddy's Pizza to make Mike look bad.
We tossed the place, and you give us $2,000.
Why? Aunt Jane wants to get the checks from the state for raising Abby.
She doesn't even care about Abby. All she wants is the monthly check from the state.
I imagine it's gotta be a lot of fucking money for Aunt Jane to go to this level of trouble. A real fortune.
Do it fast. Don't mess this up.
The goons Aunt Jane hires to vandalize Freddy's Pizza are really just a way for the movie to tack on some characters getting killed by the haunted animatronics roaming the halls. Because otherwise, there wouldn't really be any deaths in this movie, but Five Nights at Freddy's is PG-13, so despite how gruesome the machinery of the animatronics look, you don't get to see much of the damage they inflict on Freddy's and friends' few victims. Usually you just see a character's silhouette as they're murdered, or the immediate aftermath. Because of YouTubers, Five Nights at Freddy's has a very young audience, so Blumhouse wants to be able to get them into the theaters the same with their earlier meme-fueled horror flick Megan.
I'm coming with you.
Five Nights at Freddy's, despite its over-the-top, wacky premise, is surprisingly quiet and subdued in its execution of the concept. It's mostly a character-driven movie about a guy trying to maintain custody of his sister by taking a security job at a rundown restaurant he mostly sleeps through, while getting visits from a mysterious cop named Vanessa, who is essentially a lore dump.
But you said some kids went missing?
Sure, back in the 80s.
What happened to them?
She just frequently drip-feeds bits of backstory to Mike, the bland audience surrogate, while Vanessa also gives Mike somebody to explain his own backstory to.
I was there when it happened. He was taken.
Which is shockingly intertwined with the restaurant Mike now works at. The movie is mostly focused on its human characters and their story. It feels like the restaurant and its animatronic threat is very much in the background until the final act. I very often forgot what kind of movie I was even watching. It's bizarre, but it feels like Five Nights at Freddy's was made by a director who really did not want to make a Five Nights at Freddy's movie. But she was savvy enough to realize that if you make it look close enough to the source material, that would be enough to please fans while allowing her to focus on telling the admittedly extremely boring story she really wanted to tell.
We wanted to make sure we were doing the fan base justice in every decision that we made along the way.
And yeah, even as someone who isn't into the games, I gotta say it looks just like the games. The restaurant is vividly realized. The animatronic puppets created by Jim Henson's Creature Shop are loving recreations of the in-game models, but the animatronics are barely used.
Bobby!
Five Nights at Freddy's is one of those movies where it's a shallow adaptation based purely on aesthetics while remaining true to the lore of the game. It adapts, but it doesn't try to use any of the elements it inherits in entertaining ways. Spoiler warning, skip to this time code to avoid. You've been warned. The fucked up thing is the movie is focused on story, but the story is very formulaic and predictable. I knew right away Mike's brother was killed by the guy behind the Fazbear restaurant. And I knew, even though he's initially referred to as Steve Raglan, that Matthew Lillard plays William Afton. Because Lillard told everybody ahead of time that was who he was playing, but it's treated as a crazy ghost face twist at the end. It's not shocking or surprising.
Surprise, Sydney.
There's just nothing all that compelling or exciting about anything in this Five Nights at Freddy's movie. I guess maybe there was a feeling that, well, the lore of the games is mostly in the peripheral in favor of focusing on the scary gameplay. So a movie was finally an opportunity to tell the game's lore in the form of a conventional narrative. But the backstory of the animatronics overshadowed the animatronics themselves. The movie's focused more on making the animatronics cute and sympathetic instead of scary first and foremost. But you know, the movie looks like the games, which is enough to satisfy fans ultimately. Very low threshold to reach with video game adaptations. Yeah, the animatronics look exactly like they do in the game, but I don't think they look like they fit in real-world environments, especially in a movie that has such a somber, serious tone. And given that real-world rotting animatronics look so much creepier than what limited indie video game renderings can accomplish. I talk shit about Banana Splits and Willy's Wonderland, but I gotta say I'd rather rewatch those movies over Five Nights at Freddy's. At least they weren't taking themselves too seriously and were trying to be fun and entertaining. Five Nights at Freddy's is just too busy stuck up its own ass. I give Five Nights at Freddy's a Freddy out of Better Freddy. My Halloween Ends mega review comes out on the 31st. It's the longest video I've ever created, assuming I don't have to chop it up for YouTube. Fingers crossed. If you liked this video, like it, and if you loved it, click the subscribe and bell buttons for more vids. I'd also like to thank these fine folks pledged my shout-out tier on Patreon for all their kind support. Videos like this wouldn't be possible without all their help. Thank you for watching, see you next time. Dr. Wolfula signing out.